You're listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 108. Time is something that we all wish we had more of, right? And when we're hard-pressed for time, what do we sacrifice? Typically, it's taking care of ourselves and eating nutritious meals. So what would you say if I told you it would take you 1 hour a week to plan healthy, nutritious meals that would cut your cooking and prepping time down and save you time each day? If you screamed yes like I did, today's episode is for you. So tune in now to find out how. Without further ado, let's get to it. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by the lovely Lindsay Pleskot, registered dietitian with a decade of experience, which also includes working at St. Paul's Hospital, a private practice at a holistic health clinic, and now she shares her own virtual coaching programs and meal plans through lindsaypleskot.com. And she has a mission to help you make food feel good, regardless of where you live. So welcome, Lindsay. I am just so honored to have you as my guest again because we did sit down and do an interview when I first started Revue Blast. So I'm so excited to be chatting with you all over again. And I would love to share your story and advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit more about you personally.
Yeah. Hi, Jess. Thank you so much for having me on today. I was actually thinking about our first interview this morning, so I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you again. You did a great job of introducing me. As you mentioned, I am a registered dietitian and have worked in a variety of different places. And really, you were mentioning my mission is to make food feel good. And so for me, what this means, obviously like the nutrition aspect, I love food, all sides of it. But it's not sort of just the nutrition, but also how we think and feel about food. So I really love like tying that all together and helping people kind of come back to or, find the joy in eating regardless of their schedules or what's going on or maybe what's kind of happened in the past with their relationship with food. So like from a professional side, that's kind of me there. And I'm also a mom. I've got a 1.5-year-old Wilder. He is, oh my gosh, he just brings so much joy to my life. This is kind of like a chaotic phase. Everyone kept telling me like, oh, my favorite phase is like 13 months to 18 months or 15 months to 18 months. And I'm like, what happens at 18 months? But it really is like they really kind of start coming into their own personalities and testing their limits. And like, so it's so cool to see everything he's learning and what he's doing. And also it is very busy. I hate to say that word, but people say like boys, man, they have so much energy. So I'm a mama, I'm a wife, I'm a sister. I've got, family. I'm in Vancouver. And I grew up in Kamloops. So that's where my parents are still. And then my sister is in Hawaii. So I've really been missing her lately, not being able to travel there. I don't know. It's always like a tough question. Like, tell me about yourself. I'm probably missing stuff there, but a nice little sum in a nugget.
That's amazing. Your baby boy is just so adorable. And I can only imagine how much, because you want to be there, you want to be present and you want to like spend time with them. But, juggling being a mom with everything else that you have on the go, being a wife, spending time with family, running a business, that's a lot, right? Like that's a lot.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. And I love that your sister lives in Hawaii. I've always followed you I follow you on Instagram, of course, but seeing when you did go to Hawaii on your trips, I was just so jealous. I'm like, oh, it looks so beautiful.
It is so amazing. Honestly, like my sister and I have always been like the best of friends. We were so close growing up. Like I think most of my life, we used to move my mattress from my bedroom and like put it on her floor and I would just have sleepovers in her room every night. So it's so hard like having her away. But at the same time, if there's anywhere I have to visit her, I'm pretty happy to get to go to Hawaii to do that.
Exactly. Now, before we start into this interview, I am going to be including the link to our original interview in the show notes. So for the
God, no way. You did not tell me that, but that is hilarious. I actually can't wait to watch it again. It'll be pretty awkward.
It was awesome. So for those listening, it was a jam-packed interview, and it was audio, but then I transcribed it. So you will be able to kind of skim through it and see what appeals to you. But I mean, I think we went for an hour and a half. It was like one of my longest interviews, and you had so much advice and knowledge to share. It was amazing.
That is so crazy. I did not realize we talked that long. I do remember like doing the little smoothie demo in the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
at the end. I remember I was like all nervous. I was like, oh, I'm nervous to be on video. Like I hadn't done a lot of video at that point, but I love that you're including that. That's hilarious. There might be some good laughs in there.
Yeah, and we did that the questions video where I ask you random personal questions. So you're definitely going to want to see that. I'll include the link to that as well.
Oh my God. I don't even remember it. When was that? Like, I mean, I remember it, but I don't remember like the details of what we talked about. That must have been 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I can't even remember. It was
Yeah.
quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into this. Let's talk about nutrition again. So I want to hear and share with everybody that's tuning in that doesn't know you. How did you get into this field? What prompted you to become a registered dietitian?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I definitely have always been interested in food. Like, that's definitely a big kind of center point for our family. It's always been a point of connection. I'm half Chinese and half sort of a European mix, like French and Irish, I think it is mostly. But especially on my Chinese side, like my grandma, every time we'd walk into the house, it was like so much food prepared and she was like pushing food on us. And that was really her way of showing love. And like on my other side too, even my granny, I remember walking into her apartment, like we'd come down to Vancouver because my parents actually grew up here, and she'd always have like this rosemary chicken in the oven. And same thing even now when I go home, it's such a like gathering point with my family. So I think I was always like interested in food and cooking. I did lots of very interesting cooking experiments as a kid. My parents had us start cooking. I think I was probably like in grade 2 or 3. My sister's 3 years older than me, and we started cooking like one meal a week, like probably around grade 2. So I was always really interested in cooking and nutrition. I grew up playing a lot of sports. I was like super active. And like when I played like pretty high level soccer, I played in university. So I remember early on, my dad was actually my coach. But he had a dietitian come talk to our team. And I think that was like the first time that I was kind of like, oh, well, this is a job. Like someone just gets to talk about food all the time. So that was like probably, I don't know, grade 5. And then I kind of veered off when I got into high school. I ended up starting dieting, which is so crazy. Like in grade 8, I remember was the first time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to see if I can not eat the cookie at break today. They made these like really warm, gooey chocolate chip cookies at our calf at break every day. And it was really weird. It was more so, I think at that time, I just wanted to see if I could do it, but it kind of like spiraled into this like control thing. And for most of high school, I struggled with disordered eating, like most of high school and then into university. And so for like a while there, I just became super disconnected to like my body, to my connection with food. Like, and really it was a weird time. I think we're around the same age, but growing up like through the 90s, it was a very strange time where like sugar free and diet and fat free, that those foods were deemed as healthy. And so I think that was a big part of it too, is like I felt like I was being healthy and doing the right thing when I was eating like, those 100-calorie packs of cookies or like a Diet Coke, or, at times it was like really like I was really restrictive. And, through that time, I mean, it was miserable. It was a really challenging time where like thoughts about food just were in my brain all day long and really driving a lot of the things that I did, and impacted everything from like my relationship with my boyfriend, my relationship with my friends. Like I remember I didn't want to go out for lunch. Like at lunch they would, a couple of my friends had cars and they would like go and drive for lunch, and I didn't want to go because I didn't want to order anything. And then of course with sports, it really like impacted my performance. I still continued to play sports all through high school, but definitely like I remember noticing it there. And so I think like probably, all throughout I was just like, I don't want to live this way, but I didn't really know another way. And I think it was either in grade 11 or 12. Actually, it was in grade 12. I think we had a dietitian from UBC come to talk to us about the dietetics program at UBC. And I just remember like, I don't know, something was different. It just kind of, the way she talked about food, there was like nothing about restriction. It was like really this positive messaging and approach, all about like what food can do for us and how it can energize us and nourish us. And there was nothing in there about the fear part of it. And so I wish that I remembered who this dietitian was, because I also have to give credit to her for her food philosophy, because definitely there's like a range across the spectrum of the way that nutrition is shared and taught. But this was just one of those things where it was like the right time, the right place. I felt like it was exactly what I needed to hear. And things kind of like started to change. Like it was enough to just kind of plant that seed. I had always been really interested in medicine. Like I think a lot of people, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And counseling, that was the other thing, like psychology and counseling. That was the other thing that I kind of always thought I would do. I was always kind of that person that would like sit and talk to my friends and just loved like listening to and holding like a space for people to feel like they were seen. And so it's kind of funny how it's all come together and like the route that I've taken with my practice. But that was really where the interest sparked. And then I started kind of looking into the program and sort of, I don't know, it just like, again, sparked that different idea of what nutrition could be. So obviously there was some work for me to do from there. And there was definitely some ups and downs and kind of like working through those really kind of ingrained and like rigid eating behaviors. But that like, it's been years, like over a decade, probably 15 years now since I was really kind of struggling with that like disordered eating, and through a combination of therapy and then learning more about nutrition, I was really able to work through that. And I think that just ignited this like passion that I was like, man, this is what I am meant to do, is share the joy in food and like kind of remembering again all of that connection that food brought. And so that's really where the like mission to make food feel good has come from, is like I love the nutritional side, I love how good food can make us feel, but I also really want people to know that like there's no good or bad, you're not a good or bad person for the food choices you make. But often what it comes back to again is that connection with ourselves in so many ways, and really listening to and honoring what we need. So I feel like I'm like going on and on and on, but like there's that balance between understanding our bodies and the physiological part of it and the nutritional aspect, and then also learning to listen to our bodies and give ourselves permission and really trust our bodies and trust that we can go back to that like intuitive sense with eating that we're all born with.
I mean, I definitely agree with your approach and the way that you look at food, and it's such a great way to look at it. And I definitely remember that from our first chat, and it really stuck with me on how we have to be mindful, and that whole restrictive thing doesn't really work, and
Mm-hmm.
just changing the way that we view food and whatnot. I love that so much. And your journey has been so like organic, it's just naturally evolved and kind of led you to where you're at now.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when you say that, because looking back, it absolutely, you're like, whoa, it all makes sense. It all kind of came together. But definitely there was some times through there where it was like such a struggle. But I really do like believe that like the biggest struggles in our lives are kind of what push us to grow and sort of, break through that comfort zone, to to grow essentially, right? And so like sometimes it's like you feel like you're being kind of cracked open, but you're just sort of opening more space to grow into yourself. So I really do feel like everything I went through kind of like led me to, I think I have so much more compassion and understanding, and passion really because of like some of those experiences that I've had.
100%. Now, did you always think that you would own your own business, or
Definitely not.
I know.
This is like a hilarious question. Like that owning my own business was not even on my radar. So at the time, so when I was in the dietetics program, there was no like aspect of business or even like sharing kind of your information on like a blog or social media, obviously dating myself. I think now that they do have certain aspects of that as part of the program, I think that actually students do start a blog, and I think there may be some business courses in it, but I didn't even honestly know that this would be a possibility. Like when I started school, social media didn't even really exist. Like Facebook, I think started when I got to UBC, and even the first couple of years, like I was like, what is this Facebook thing? Like, and then obviously Instagram after that. But yeah, I definitely never planned on starting a business or running a business.
So at what point did you realize, okay, you know what? Maybe I should start something on my own. Maybe I should start my own practice.
Yeah, so okay, so that's actually a good point. Like I think there definitely was always part of me that was like, okay, private practice. I think that's where my like passion for kind of the counseling side and the nutrition would really come together, would be in a private practice. So when I went into the program, I did definitely always think like, okay, I think eventually I'd like to own a private practice. It definitely scared me because I was like, I don't even know how I would like get clients or like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to help people, but how would I get them there? So I definitely was always interested in private practice. I did my internship at St. Paul's Hospital. So as part of the dietetics program, it's a 5-year program. So you have to do at least 3 years of nutrition, 3 years of sciences before you can apply. And then once you get into the program, there's another 2 years specifically of like the dietetics nutrition, like all of your courses become focused on nutrition. And then your last year is an internship. Did I calculate that right? That's 6 years. I'm confused now. So sorry, it's 5. I think it's 5 years. So it's 3 years of sciences you have to do first. The first time I applied, I didn't get into the program. And then the second year I applied, I did. So I did 6 years, but I think it's 5 if you go right through. So the last year you do your internship in the hospital. And like, even when I was going into internship, I didn't think that was where I was going to end up, but I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would. Like the cool thing about working in a hospital is you're always working on an interdisciplinary team where you're working with like the doctors and nurses and pharmacists. And so you really get this kind of like holistic picture of someone's care. But I just felt like I didn't get to work like as intimately as I wanted to with my clients, I guess, like throughout the process. So in the hospital, often they're getting like some brief nutrition education, or I ended up working in mental health for quite a while. So we would do like cooking classes and nutrition classes, but I really wanted to be able to work with them outside of the hospital and follow that journey and like see what the day-to-day things were that people struggled with. And like, I really feel that it's like what we do in our day-to-day, it's those little things, that's what all adds up. And of course, there's a difference on whether you're treating something or preventing, like, or I guess the prevention side is kind of what you do in private practice. There's two sides of it, but my interest was really in that, like understanding the psychology of it, what drives those habits. And so I did 5 years part-time in the hospital, but I started my private practice about a year in. I started doing it part-time. So I definitely always knew that it was of interest, and I kind of like eased my way into it.
Gotcha. Now, what was your experience starting your practice? Some people start something and they have absolutely no idea and they just kind of go with it and they take it, one day at a time type thing and learn as they go. Or some people like create a detailed plan and figure things out and like actually execute it. So, what was that experience like for you?
Number one is definitely me. I think part of it was that I just didn't even know what I was getting myself into. Like I was just like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna, start working in a clinic and people will come see me and that will be that. So I did not have a business plan. I didn't have like a marketing plan. I really had no plan. I remember when I went and interviewed with the owner of the clinic, because I was just renting a space there. So right from the get-go, it really was my own business. But I remember him asking me like, what's your plan? How are you going to bring clients in? I just remember stuttering, like fumbling through that, being like, oh, I don't have a plan. I don't know. So really it was just diving in head first. And like, that's kind of what I do in life. Like I have a love-hate relationship with it, because I tend to like I'll feel kind of that discomfort of like that growth. And I'm like, I really don't want to do this, but I can feel that I need to do this. So I kind of just
Mm-hmm.
jumped in, and the owner of my clinic was amazing. He was like a really great mentor as I started. And he had experience with building his, so it was a holistic health clinic. It was primarily massage therapy, but there was other modalities there. And so he kind of coached me through like, okay, go into doctor's clinics and just introduce yourself, like bring in some information about you. And I actually like, I think this surprises a lot of people, but I'm quite introverted. Like when I'm around my friends and people that I'm really comfortable with, I like talk a lot. I've got a lot of energy. I can be like really outgoing, but when I'm outside of my comfort zone, I can be like really shy. And like in school, it was always so hard for me to put my hand up and speak up. And so I found this really hard. Like I really struggled with this, but I knew that it was important. So I kind of just like started from there. I would do like free talks in different like clinics or businesses, like Blue Shore Financial. I remember it was right beside our clinic, and I would go in and do like free talks there, and just to kind of give people an idea of what a dietitian could do. So it really started like that. And then when I went into my private practice, I started my first website, which I couldn't even call a blog. Like it was literally just a place online for people to find me. And then it's kind of like evolved from there, but it's been very much like one step at a time, kind of learning as I go. And I'm sort of just getting to the point now where I'm like, okay, I got to like make a little bit more of an actual plan here.
Now, when you started this business, did you have any fears? Like, did you have any limiting beliefs or anything like that that you had to overcome in order to continue?
Oh, absolutely. Like, yeah, I had a lot of a lot of fears, a lot of limiting beliefs. A big one for me was like, will I actually be able to make a living doing this and support myself? Like at the hospital, I had a regular paycheck. I had benefits. And I remember like having mat leave. For some reason, that was a big thing for me, as I was like, I have to stay here like at least until I have kids, because I got to have this mat leave. And my husband, Mike, he has always been so incredibly supportive of me. And he was like, you know what? We'll figure it out. Like, I believe in you. You can do this. But that was a big one, as I was just like, man, if I leave the hospital, like, what if no one comes to see me? What if I'm making like $1 a month? But so that was kind of a big one, but that was also just kind of trusting and then educating. But it was like a slow build, which was why I started part-time in the private practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly, just like a lot of people, it was just that like believing that I was enough. I had major limiting beliefs about like, am I good enough to do this? Am I smart enough to do this? Like, why would someone want to come see me? Yeah, there was a lot of that I had to work through, and really it was just like doing it, whenever I feel like that, it's like taking action is the best thing you can do.
100%. The moment you give yourself space to start thinking is when you're going to talk yourself out of it. So
Oh
just like
yeah.
act immediately.
Yes. And that's like, I'm saying this to myself as I say it, because I am definitely someone that can get in my head. Never does me any good though.
Now, I know before we started this interview, we were chatting about, promoting ourselves, which I struggle with as well, and you
Yeah.
do as well. What is it about that really makes you kind of like pause before you do it?
Gosh, it's so crazy. Like I was like laughing. One of my friends is like a business coach, and we were like laughing because she's like, you're like, what you have to offer is so amazing, but you are literally the worst person ever at selling. And I'm like, I don't know what I think it's because like, part of it is like I'm so passionate about this, and I truly come from a place of just wanting to help as many people as possible. And so I think when it transitions from, because like we're in the area that I work, like blogging and on social media, like 90% of what you do is free, right? Like you're constantly writing blogs, you're creating content, you're taking these photos, you're doing these creative things that will help people. And so when there's that transition from like the free to something paid, I don't know, I've just always got this like block that I'm like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm like trying to take advantage of them or like being too pushy, or I don't know. I just don't want anyone to ever have that like icky feeling from me. And I guess I've probably been exposed to that before. But I think I just have to trust that like I know in my heart that my intention is nothing but the best. I like believe so much in what I can share and have to offer. So that's like still something that I'm working through, is really just trusting that, when you're offering your services, it's like getting it into the hands of the people that need it. And, you probably have heard this a lot too, like by not sharing that you have those things to provide, like you're really doing a disservice because you can't help anyone if they don't know what you have, right? So it's
Totally.
just doing that. But I think, yeah, it just comes down to that feeling of like, wanting people to see you for who you are, see your intentions. And like, I think in life, one of my greater missions is like, I just always want people to leave better off than they came for like interacting with me or for spending time with me. And so I think but sometimes to the extreme where I'm like, I only want to like offer and give everything away for free. And yeah, I don't know. It's complicated.
Definitely.
What would you say? Like, what do you think it is for you?
I feel icky about it.
Yeah.
I don't, there's something about, I feel like I'm pushing people to like spend money. And then I start questioning, I'm like, are they going to think that what I'm offering is valuable in
Yes.
conjunction with what I'm asking payment for, like the amount that I'm asking
Totally.
for? And I'm like, I never want to disappoint anybody. And I've always been that type of person to just like do things for free. Like even when I had the wedding business, I was just
Yeah.
like, I would do anything for free. Like I wouldn't care at the beginning, right? Like I just
Hmm.
loved doing what I did so much that to
Yeah.
me, I didn't need the money for it. So
Yeah.
it's different. It's very different asking for
Yeah.
money.
And that's such like programming. Like I was just talking to someone about it yesterday and they were saying like, they were like, you have this like idea in your head of that, like, that car salesman and like, not to, sorry, if anyone's a car salesman listening, like there's amazing car salesmen, but it's like, that's kind of that like idea that we get in our head of that like pushy. And I think I totally agree with you. I never want to disappoint everyone. I'm like always overthinking, like, am I giving enough value? But I think for that exact reason, we probably go above and beyond in the
Mhm.
value that we offer, right? We can be each
Totally.
other's accountability buddies at this.
Yes. Now, even though you have this fear of promoting yourself, you've done some pretty big things. You've been on TV commercials, you've had big partnerships and collaborations with amazing brands. So, how did you muster up? Like, was there any aspect of those things that you've accomplished that really pushed you outside of your comfort zone that you had to muster up the courage for?
Oh yeah. Honestly, again, I feel like it's like every step it's been like mustering up the courage. Like none of this stuff really comes naturally to me. Um, which like it's weird because I feel like there's this sense in me that I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do. I can feel that like this is what I'm meant to do and I want to like share this. But in terms of like putting myself out there, that's really hard for me. I've never naturally been someone like even before using social media for my business, I didn't really share much on social media. And so like the commercials, that was the hugest thing. Being on video, any kind of like public speaking or being in front of a lot of people used to terrify me. So I remember so clearly the commercials, like the first time that I did those, I remember someone had sent me an email, like they couldn't say what it was for, but it was like an agency saying like, we're looking for someone to do some commercials that has like a nutrition background and some cooking. And it was again, that feeling like, I don't know if you can relate to this, but when you get that feeling and it's like that almost like anxious, like it's almost that like anxiety feeling like in your chest, but there's such a difference when you're like, okay, I'm doing this because I should versus like, oh my God, I can feel that I need to do this. So it was kind of that like I need to do this feeling, but I was like, there's no way I can be on camera. There's no way I can do this. And like one of my good friends, Sammy, she was actually working with me at the time, and I like called her basically to tell her what had come up. And I was like, I don't know if I should do it, but really I just wanted her to be like, hey, you have to do it. I just needed someone to give me that push.
Mhm.
And so again, that was just an example of doing. Like I went to the first shoot and I was, oh my gosh, I'll see if I can like find that video. I was so awkward. I was just like holding my hands in like the weirdest position and so unnatural. And I remember the producer was so nice and he was like, just relax. Like, put your hands on the counter. And but so I ended up, so they were commercials for like a big grocery chain here, Save On Foods. And it was like, so the first one, they were like, okay, you're going to do one, and then we're going to see if we want you to do any more. So like, talk about pressure. But I ended up getting the job for it, and it ended up being a weekly commercial for a full year. So I guess I ended up doing, I think there was about 50 commercials that I ended up doing. And it definitely took a while, but every time I got more comfortable, and I totally credit that experience and pushing myself and doing it over and over and over again to now, like, I feel so comfortable on camera now. which is kind of funny because I still sometimes like on my stories feel sort of like awkward. And if I'm in one of those like introverted moments, I'm still like, oh, it's hard to go on here. But I really, really love connecting with people through video. I just find you can come across so much more as yourself versus writing. Like I do a lot of writing for my blog and I really enjoy that too. But I really do love connecting with people on video. So it's kind of like one of those funny things where it's like, I feel like it's something I'm meant to do, but there's a ton of resistance in me. And it's just been kind of following that like gut feeling of like, I think this is one of those times I need to like jump off the cliff and do it.
Yeah, totally get that. Now, with a baby, being a
Mhm.
wife, running a business, trying to fit in some me time in there as well, I can just imagine how insane your days are. So, how do you organize your schedule so that you're able to be present with your child? You're able to spend time with your husband unplugged, take time for yourself whenever you can, and then stay on top of the regular, consistent, required social media and
Yeah.
content publishing?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it is difficult, but I think like when I look at what my like core values are in life and like what really allows me to like live in alignment with like who I truly am and what I meant to do, like being present is way up there for me. And so I think having that as a pillar and knowing that so strongly, it kind of like guides the rest of what I do. And so it's funny because becoming a mom has actually made me a lot better at having boundaries and saying no. And that's like been a big part of it. I think like, it's so crazy that it takes this, but I feel like often it takes caring about something like someone else to push you to do things, right? Like before having Wilder, it was just like, I'm like a recovering people pleaser. I would just say yes to everything because I like, again, didn't want to disappoint people or didn't want to seem like hard to work with or, again, wanted to be able to help people. But when you have like someone else to take care of, your time becomes that much more limited. And when you're overextending yourself, it affects them too, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
knowing that it's going to affect him, like I don't know. I take the time, I guess, like when I'm making decisions, that's always been a challenge for me too, is like, I just always want to answer right away and like give a yes or a no, or in the past, always say yes. But I really try to practice now, like taking time and sitting with it, being like, is this a yes or a no? And trying to like tune into my sort of like intuition and trust that. So I think, yeah, learning to have boundaries and how to say no has been a huge thing because I know that I need to have that time for family. And like scheduling, like I schedule every single thing in. Mike always laughs at me because he's like, what is happening with your calendar? Like you have reminders going off every second. I use my like alarm a lot too. If I really don't forget something so that I'll actually hear it. And like, so there's always like alarms going off throughout the day. And he's like, you are crazy. I don't even know what's going on. But yeah, I use my calendar. So I actually use my Google Calendar for this. And just recently I started putting everything in there. So at one point I would use like my Google Calendar and then my physical planner. And then like I use Asana as like a project management tool. And I would have some things in each depending on what the projects were or if it was like personal or work. But I have started putting absolutely everything into my Google Calendar and I code it by colors. So if it's like family or personal, I do it in purple. If it's work related, I do it in pink. If it's like something I need to really remember, it's in red. But that has really helped me to actually see the time that I have. I have a really bad habit of like scheduling myself like minute to minute and not leaving any room in the day for things to go wrong. When you have a kid, things
Mm-hmm.
rarely go to plan. So this has been really helpful, like learning how to leave some white space in there, scheduling everything in one place so I can truly see what's there. And then I think it's just been coming back to that pillar of like remembering that being present, having enough energy to truly, be my best self that I can be for my family. That has been helpful. I don't know if I answered that. I feel like I kind of went all over the place there.
No, you did. And I love how you use your phone alarm, which I do as well. And your calendar organizing is amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
That's awesome. I love it.
I should make sure that there isn't going to be one going off in the middle of this interview.
All right, so I want to talk about nutrition. So
Okay.
let's dive into this. Now, you are the queen of meal prep. I see you do this all the time, and you even have something that you offer to help with meal prep. So I kind of want to talk about this. what is the best way to do it most efficiently? So what are your tips for grocery shopping, prepping tips? Are there certain foods that you should prep versus don't do this, do it on the day of type thing?
Yeah, totally. It's so funny that you say that like I'm the queen of meal prep because like it has not always been this way. I was kind of forced into it. I am definitely like a creative type. Like I love ideas. I love like taking action. And so being organized and planning things out doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. Like I don't like the planning phase. I just want to do. But yeah, this kind of like happened by accident. So when I was in my private practice, my clients were always asking for meal plans. And when I first started, I actually wouldn't do meal plans for people, just for the reason that, again, I want food to feel good, which means making the right choices for you, being able to eat food that you like, being able to honor like your preferences and all of that good stuff. And so I was like, I can't write it down and tell you what to eat. But what I realized is that like having something to follow is sort of that tool that allows people to take the learnings and actually put them into action, right? So often we'll hear like, oh, we need to eat more of this food or less of that food. But then it's like, what does that actually look like on our plate? So meal plans were kind of that guide to okay, I'm learning all these things. I know I need to incorporate more of this into my diet. And here's a delicious recipe that I can make from home and have the confidence to put into action. So I started doing these meal plans. But what I would see was that over time, my clients wouldn't stick to them or use them. And again, it's not like sticking to it. There's, no diet component to it, but they kind of fall back into those routines of feeling like, going to their old go-tos or not doing the proper planning because like creating a meal from scratch every night eventually just became too much time. So I created a meal prep method called the 3-2-1 method that would kind of cover that issue of like getting good quality food, getting the nutrition you need, but not requiring a lot of time. And so from that, I kind of ended up, like you said, becoming like so obsessed with meal prep and how I could make it more and more efficient without sacrificing flavor or variety. And so this is something that we do in our house. Like I want to say like all the time, obviously there's the weeks that we don't do it, but especially with Wilder now, like the weeks that we don't do meal prep, it just feels like things like fall off the rails and it is chaos because especially the days I'm working. So Wilder goes to daycare part-time. Like by the time we pick him up and get home, it's like 5:30. He goes to bed around 7. So if there isn't food prepped, like there really leaves no time in the evening to actually spend time with him, have our fun like bath and book time. So how I sort of, or like how this method is different, it's kind of self-explanatory once you hear it, is that you prep 3 vegetables, 2 proteins, and 1 carbohydrate, or you sort of plan your meals around those core components of the recipes rather than choosing individual recipes and meals that you're going to make every night, or rather than starting at that point. So when we're like meal planning, if we are just picking out like 5 or 7 different recipes that we want to make, that's going to be like a good list of ingredients that you're going to have to buy on your grocery list that really don't work with each other to maximize on time efficiency, right? So if you're like, I'm going to make tacos and then I'm going to make a stir fry and then I'm going to make, a burrito, those are all separate ingredients. So by focusing on the core components of the recipes that can then be mixed and matched, instantly you streamline the whole process. So for one, a lot less decision overwhelm. And for 2, like you're going to really cut back on the grocery list, the grocery shop. And then those are the actual ingredients that you do for your meal prep for the week. So yeah, so it kind of like, it just sort of shows you how like recipes are really just a template, right? Like we often see a recipe and feel like we need to follow it step by step, but really they're just a template where you could swap the protein in there or swap the vegetable that's in there. So with those core ingredients, you can really make so many different meals. And the way that you're able to do that is you do that prep on the weekend, and then throughout the week, you mix and match those ingredients with other like quick and ready to go items. Like I call them fast foods, which is, my definition of a fast food is like a whole food ingredient that takes little to no extra time to prep. So an example of that would be like, say you prep some chicken or some salmon, you could turn that into tacos really quickly on the night of. Your protein is cooked. Maybe you've roasted up like some cabbage or some cauliflower or something that can go into your taco as well. And then on the night of, it's just a matter of flashing them in a pan, reheating them, maybe adding some spices, which would be a fast food, and then putting them onto like a tortilla, which is a fast food, adding some greens, which is a fast food, maybe making a little like yogurt sauce on that. So from investing a small amount of time with your prep, you end up with like a 10 maximum 20-minute meal from start to finish, and really no extra cleanup.
Okay, that just kind of clicked in my head what 3-2-1 is for. And I remember
Yeah.
loving your method before, but now it just makes more sense. So when you have these components that you've picked, so the 3 veggies, the 2 protein, and the 1 carb,
Mm-hmm.
do you plan which recipes you're going to make using those items for the week, or do you just do it day by day?
Yeah, so I mean, you could kind of do it both ways. Like ideally, so obviously, like in the meal plans, there's recipes that go with those 3-2-1 prepped ingredients that are all planned out for you. But yeah, it's a good idea to then kind of sit down and plan, like just choose a few meals that you're going to make with those core components. So you could have either chosen like an idea of the foods that you feel like eating that week, or from those 3-2-1 ingredients, then you might just sit down and take 10 minutes and say, okay, we feel like tacos tonight. We feel like a stir fry the next night. We feel like, maybe like a Buddha bowl the next night, maybe a big sort of salad with like a hearty salad with all the components in there. So you just kind of choose like the recipe template, or even if you have recipes, your favorite recipes that you like, or even a recipe that you looked up online, you can easily kind of swap in the protein or swap in the veggies that you've already prepped to work
Mm-hmm.
with that recipe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, I love that. That actually makes it a lot easier because I was just like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, totally. And honestly, the part of like the method that I created, I kind of became like obsessed with every detail of it, but I wanted the actual prep component to be under an hour. And so when you're only prepping 6 ingredients, you can get that all done in an hour. So one thing, like tip that I would give people, is to really pay attention to the order that they're doing their meal prep in, because the like depending on what you start with, it's really going to impact how long it takes. So I always recommend to start with like your grain or your carbohydrate that you're cooking. So say if that's like rice or quinoa or whatever it is that you're preparing, once you put that in your rice cooker or on the stove, like you don't really have to touch it while it cooks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So start with that. And then once that's on the stove and cooking, then you move on to your proteins. So with proteins, you might need to like season them a little bit, or like if you're cooking them on the stove, they might need a couple of stirs. But again, once they're kind of seasoned and put in the oven or on the stove, you really don't need to touch them much, maybe just one flip or stir. And then finish with the veggies, because they take the longest to prepare, right? Which is often why they're actually missing from our plate. It's like the most important component to get all those nutrients in there, all that fiber. But we often leave the veggies out just for that reason, is that to get all of your ingredients out every night and like wash them and cut them up before you even start cooking, it can be easier to just like throw together, throw some chicken in the oven and boil some pasta, right? So finish with your veggies so that you can wash them, you can cut them up, you can either store them in some containers, or some you might want to roast. But while you've got that open cooking time of your grain and of your protein, you can get those vegetables prepared and ready to go, and then do your cleanup while everything finishes cooking. And it can be done in 1 hour. Like this is what I allot myself every week. I'm like, 1 hour, that's it. I'm setting the timer and that's all I'm going to do. And because of that, it gives me the motivation to actually do it.
That's amazing. That's really good time management. I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like a lot of planning that goes into it. But it's like, that's kind of the key, right? Is often we feel like putting the time in up front, it kind of feels like a cost of our time, but because it saves you so much time during the week, right? It's like same thing as batching your emails or batching your laundry. Like when you're doing a similar task, if you do it all at once, you then limit like the cleanup of the pan and the dishes, the actual like chopping, you limit that to one period, and then you don't have to do that at all again throughout the week.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's perfect. Now, when it comes to energy, this is something we all need to stay on top of the daily to-do lists and
Yeah.
the responsibilities and everything else that comes along with that. So, what would be your advice on the types of foods that we should absolutely be including in our diet throughout the day?
Okay, this is a great question, and it's kind of two-part. So, like, the first part is looking at the actual nutritional aspect and like which foods are really going to give us like quality, long-lasting, sustainable energy. And so, like, following that 3-2-1 method kind of takes care of this for you because you're preparing in the largest quantity the vegetables, right? You've got your three vegetables, and then you're preparing protein and like a high fiber sort of carbohydrate. So what I like to teach my clients is something called the plate method, and it's just this visual that when you are putting a meal together, you're aiming for half of that plate to be filled with vegetables. So there's so many different varieties of what that could be there. It could be like bell peppers or cucumbers or greens. There's so many different things you could fill that half plate with, but that's what we want to inch towards. So if you're not doing this at all right now, that's totally okay. I would say if you're going to do one thing, like aiming to get more vegetables in your diet is going to give you sort of the most impact. And then you want a quarter of your plate to have some sort of protein. So whether that's your chicken, your tofu, your beans, but you do want a quarter of the plate to be protein. And then the other quarter of your plate to be some form of carbohydrate, ideally with some fiber in it. So again, it could be yams, it could be quinoa, it could be rice, millet. There's so many different options. And then the last thing that you want to do is to finish with some fat. So that could be, again, a drizzle of olive oil or your cooking oil. It could be some avocado. It could be some nuts or seeds sprinkled on at the end. So I love having a visual, and you can really like picture this plate as I'm talking about it, right? And that doesn't mean it has to be like, broccoli, chicken, and rice. This tacos could look like this. Pizza could look like this. By adding a salad or by throwing some extra veggies on top. So I really want to like encourage people to get creative with that and make sure that it's still food they love, but inching towards that balance. So when we look at vegetables, we all know that vegetables are a great thing, right? But they are packed with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, which, protect our cells from environmental damage, from, the natural process of aging. So they have they're so nutritionally dense that when we're getting more vegetables, we're just naturally going to be getting more of those micronutrients, which are, the nutrients we need on a smaller level that kind of make everything run smoothly in our bodies. And then, with protein, we need that for a lot of the chemical reactions in our body for building muscle. There's a lot of important nutrients like iron and zinc that come in our protein foods. So again, we know that proportionally we're going to be getting kind of a right amount of those nutrients. And then same thing with the carbohydrates. These are our body's main source of energy. We do not need to fear carbs. They are very important. A lot of whole grains carry like different B vitamins, which actually play a really important role in turning the calories or the energy that we eat into energy our body can actually use. So from a nutritional and then the fats, sorry, I skipped over that one, but fats are really important for, they carry certain vitamins. They help us absorb certain vitamins. So vitamins A, D, E, and K can actually only be absorbed with fat. And then we know like fats like omega-3 fatty acids that are found in fatty fish like salmon or, in nuts and seeds, things like hemp hearts, chia seeds. These play a really important role in our heart health, in our brain health, in reducing inflammation in our body. So from a nutritional standpoint, planning our plate out like that is really going to contribute to energy and to helping our body run smoothly. And then the other thing that this balance does for our energy is it really works to balance our blood sugar levels. I always kind of like laugh because it's like talking about blood sugars is not sexy. It's not like, it's like, oh, how do I balance my blood sugars? But it is kind of the key to a lot of our health. So when our blood sugars are balanced, and I'll just quickly explain why this combo does that. So fiber for one, which are found in our vegetables, in our whole grains, actively works to sort of slow down the rate that our blood sugars rise. The fiber takes longer to break down. Therefore, the carbohydrates and the energy is sort of released more slowly. With the protein is very dense. And so it also takes a longer time to break up. And so anything we eat with protein is going to leave our stomach more slowly, is going to digest more slowly, and therefore increase our blood sugars more slowly. And then fat also has the same role. It slows our gastric emptying or slows the rate our stomach empties. And so all of these factors work together to basically give us like a slow release energy capsule. It makes sure that the food that we're eating, the energy that we're consuming is released to us on kind of a more slow, steady stream so that we don't get those spikes and drops in blood sugars, in energy. And it's really going to kind of work to help us feel better from all things, including energy, our mood, right? So when our blood sugars are stable, it's going to help our mood. And it also is really powerful for cravings. When we're balancing our blood sugars, our body doesn't have to send us that intense signal to eat in order to bring that energy up because we've got that slow, steady release.
Wow.
Hopefully that wasn't information overload. If there's anything you want me to clarify, let me know.
I'm definitely going to be really re-listening to that and then taking notes. That just blew my mind. See, I have this issue where I eat more veggies than anything else, and I know that not including enough fat and protein is my issue.
Okay.
So I definitely struggle with that. But I definitely see that the benefit is there to help with energy and blood sugar levels.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that like each has its role, right? And I think that's a really important point for you to bring up because we often hear like eat more vegetables. We know vegetables are nutritious, but if we're only eating vegetables or primarily focusing on vegetables, we're not getting those other important nutrients that will sustain our energy. So I feel like I feel like that was like a long explanation, but basically long story short is like keeping that plate method in mind with the half plate of veggies, quarter plate of like starchy carbohydrates, quarter plate of protein, and finishing with fat. So if your meal is tacos, you might want to look at how can you incorporate some roasted vegetables into them in a really delicious way, or maybe having like a coleslaw salad on the side. If it's pizza, maybe you fill half your plate with a salad first, or maybe add roasted vegetables on top so that it can inch towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, like, so having a variety of nutrients, balancing it out that way. But that's kind of like keeping that model in mind will really help to support energy.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for going into that detail. All right, so I want to talk about what you have to offer. So what do you have available to your community?
So I don't know if I actually mentioned it when I was describing the 3-2-1, but I do have 4-week meal plans. So these are the 3-2-1 method meal plans. And so basically what they are, there's regular and vegan options. I did the regular ones first, and then a lot of people obviously are interested in eating more plant-based. So there's full vegan versions and the regular versions. And what they include is 4 weeks of meal plans that have your grocery list done for you. They've got that 3-2-1 aspect planned out and then worked into different recipes throughout the week. So there's also the prep instructions that walks you through that 1 hour prep to make sure it's only an hour, walks you through how to package it up, how to store it so that it lasts throughout the week, because that's important. You do need to use your freezer if you're prepping meat at the beginning of the week. And then it provides recipes. There's options for either 5 days a week or 7 days a week. And it's dinner, of course, but also breakfast, lunch, and snacks. So it like covers everything, walks you through it so that you don't have to think about it and can save all that time. And just really honestly, like I said at the beginning, the purpose in creating this was really to give people their time back and give them that confidence about how to put meals together, what to put on their plate. So you're kind of like learning as you do it. And by the time you finish the plans, my hope is that people feel really confident in the kitchen and sort of know how to mix different flavors. Every recipe in there is based on that plate model. So it gives a really good idea of like what that could look like in different types of meals and combinations. And then within those meal plans, there's also like a setting up your kitchen guide for pantry staples, kitchen tools. Again, just making sure you're really set. There's swap guides. I mentioned, like for me, it was just really important that people had the ability to make swaps for preferences or dietary needs. So because it's laid out in that 3-2-1 format, it makes it really easy to swap in and out for different veggies or different proteins to make it work for you. And then there's a Facebook group as well. So there's a private Facebook community that everyone who purchases the plans has access to. And I'm in there throughout the week, just like checking on people, seeing how things are going, celebrating different wins, but always there to answer questions We do different Facebook Lives based on community questions. So that's kind of like my big meal planning program. I also have a free mastering meal planning workshop. So for anyone that's kind of just new to this and dipping their toes in and not quite ready to dive full on into meal plans, I have a workshop that kind of walks people through how to get started with meal prep, kind of explains those steps of the 3-2-1 so they can start trying it out. And I also have like a sample 5-day meal plan for anyone that just wants to see how it works and try it out. So that's kind of on the meal planning side. I'm doing like a really limited number of one-on-ones right now. This is something I have found like harder to manage having Wilder, is having like those really set appointment times. At this stage in my life, it often works better to be able to jump in and out of work when I need to. So I'm taking a small amount of one-on-ones on, but not a ton. Of course, I've got like my blog and social media. I really try to share just a ton of value on there. Lots of different recipes on my Instagram. If you go to like my IGTV, or my reels, I did this whole series on meal prep hacks. So they're like really digestible. No pun intended, little pieces of information on just super quick things that you can do in the kitchen to speed things up. So like one of my favorite ones that's so simple, it's just like using a microplane to grate your garlic. I hate chopping up garlic. I don't know what it is, getting like all over my fingers. So it's like little things like that will just make your experience in the kitchen easier, more streamlined, and sort of hopefully bring some of your time back and some of that joy back. And then I've got a couple of things that I'm working on that I cannot share right now. Maybe I'll have been able to by the time this episode airs, but a couple of things I'm really excited for. So I will be sharing those like on my social media, and in my newsletter. So I wish I could say more right now, but you'll have to keep an eye out for those things.
Amazing. So you're definitely going to want to sign up for her newsletter and make sure you're following her on Instagram to get those. Now, the very last question is, if anybody wants to learn more about you or to connect with you, where can they find you? Where do you hang out the most?
So I am definitely on Instagram the most, and it's pretty easy. My handle is just at Lindsay Pleskot. My website is lindsaypleskot.com. So I'm on there quite a bit as well with recipes and just different like nutrition articles. YouTube, I've taken a little bit of a hiatus from that. It was unplanned. I do have a lot of videos on YouTube, but after Wilder was born, I was finding it hard to keep up with that schedule. So there's definitely some good ones on there, but I have yet to kind of come back to that more regularly. Did I cover it all? I'm on Pinterest, and Twitter I'm not on Twitter. I don't know if I should be on Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
I used to, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I couldn't keep up with that one. There's just too many things.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too overwhelming.
Too much. Basically, it's Lindsay Pleskot. That's just, you can Google it, and my website shares like links to all of my social media platforms and stuff too. So that's probably the easiest place.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for taking the time to join me again and for sharing such incredible advice on how we can maintain a healthy, nutritious diet, even when life gets a little bit chaotic. I know so many are going to benefit from your knowledge and advice.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me, Jess.
I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.